Good. Excellent. All right. So for this week, were you able to set up your groups, Ms. Johnson? Set up your groups and add your members to the group?
I started doing like, I don't know if I was supposed to label them different, but I started when you were doing it last week, I was like doing it along with you. So I had
Okay.
like the groups and I put some of the people in the groups too.
Excellent.
Like,
Excellent. What is the name of your business that you've decided to create?
mm,
What did
I
you
don't
name your
know.
What did you name your business, or what type of business is it?
It was like an art thing. So it'll be like sourcing out art. Because you
Okay.
know how like people commission arts and stuff like that. So it'll be like a place where you can
Okay.
commission art.
Okay. So it's a business that will. So you're selling art from various artists. Is that correct? Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
I didn't think of a name yet.
Okay, that's good. That's all. That's fine. So when you think of a name, just go ahead and add that. Let me just make a notation here. I always like to keep up with what businesses that you all decided to implement. Okay, so for this week we're going to focus on the AWS core services, the compute, right? Their compute category, right? So for this particular week, we're going to focus on what is compute and how it's very essential when utilizing AWS services. All right, so we're going to focus on the EC2 Elastic Cloud Computing, which is just basically a computer. It's a virtual computer that's in the cloud, or basically it's at some data center and Amazon has multiple EC2 virtual computers, and we'll delve very deeply into that. So we're going to look at EC2s. We're going to build an EC2 instance, right? And then add a web server to it, right? And you'll see that very shortly for your business. And then we'll delve into Lambda, right? Serverless computing, right? And then we'll take a look at containers, right? How we're able to use containers. So the key component here is, Ms. Johnson, is that there are
Mhm.
multiple ways in which we can host our platform, our business, right? And we can either utilize EC2s, we can utilize a Lambda function where it will automatically trigger some type of event that we want, right? Or we can use containers, right? Where we can actually store our services on containers. So these are three different ways in which we can actually utilize or design our business, right? And we can actually use all three if we chose, right? So for the EC2, and I'll just highlight because I think these definitions are really straightforward. So one of the earliest and most widely used Amazon services is the EC2 instance, right? And we call that the Elastic Computer Cloud, right? And when we talk about elastic, we simply mean that it's very quick, right? And it's rapid. We're able to build it very quickly, right? And we can tear it down very quickly as well, or just terminate it. Okay, so which provides a resizable virtual server, right, in the cloud. The servers are known as instances, right? And they behave like a physical computer, like your physical computer that's hosted on the AWS infrastructure. So remember that large infrastructure that I showed you all week number one, right? Where it has
Mhm.
all of these different services, right? And there's an infrastructure, right? Basically that Amazon has available where they host all of these virtual servers. Okay, so when we launch this EC2 instance that we're going to do today, right, it contains an operating system like Windows, right, or even Linux. We're going to choose a Linux server for our business, right? An instance type, right? The type will determine the type of central processing unit, meaning how fast your system can go, right? How much memory it has, right? Meaning how much cache it can store right there on the system, the storage, right? How many pieces of data we can actually store, right? And there are different types of storage that we can add to this EC2 instance, right? And then the networking capacity, right? What type of bandwidth, meaning how fast or how wide we want our data to travel across the network, right? And then we'll take a look at securing that network and then some storage volumes. Next week, we'll delve into the S3, which provides us with like an external storage capability where we can store all of our business art in your instance, right? All of the different images of the different types of artwork that you want to sell. So the benefit, again, is that it's scalable, right? Meaning that we can change it at any time. If there's like during the Christmas season, right? The Christmas season, you're going to have massive amounts of people logging on to your website. So we can scale up, right? The actual CPU, we can scale up the actual memory size. We can scale it up to fit the massive number of clients that are utilizing our EC2 instance, right? Or we can scale down during the summertime, right? People are not buying Christmas items, or they may not be buying a lot of items. So it's scalable, right? It's flexible, right? We can choose different operating systems, different storage types and instances, right? And then cost control, again, Amazon is you pay as you go, right? So you're not just paying one flat fee, you're paying based on the amount of usage, okay? So the next item here is Lambda serverless computing, right? So this EC2 gives you the virtual server, right? But sometimes, like it states here, you may not want to manage servers at all. So we can use what is known as Lambda. This is a serverless computing, because what you do is provide, have you heard of programming? You've heard of programming before, right? Where people write programming code, Python, Java, C++, and so forth. Well, you provide your own code that will trigger some type of event, right? So if a user wants to access one of your art images, right, you can write a piece of code that will trigger a Lambda function to display certain images and things like that. Okay, so like it says, you write your own code, Python, Node.js, or Java, right? And then you upload it, right, to this AW Lambda. We'll take a look at that Thursday, right? It can be a little beastie, but it's once you do it a few times, it makes a lot of sense, okay? So some of the benefits for using Lambda, right? You don't have to manage your server. You just upload your code into this Lambda function, right? And it's automatically triggered when users need to execute it. And again, you pay as you go. All right, so when we look at containers, containers are just basically multiple virtual, how can I say that? They're not multiple virtual servers, but they're a lightweight, I'll just read this here. It's a lightweight package of software that includes everything that is needed to run on an application, right? And we'll take a look at the image, right, of how it actually works. So you have one particular server or container that will contain the operating system and the network connection, and you have multiple containers or different devices that will actually utilize that one container, right? And we'll take a look at it to see a little bit more. So it's a fully managed service for running Docker containers, and we'll delve into that. So you have different types, right? You also have Elastic Kubernetes service, right? This is a managed service for running Kubernetes clusters, right? And it's very flexible as well. Okay, so these are the three items that we'll take a look at in a little bit more depth. All right, so going here. All right, so again, this week we're going to actually delve, and that was just a super high level, right? But now let's just kind of delve into it to see what all of these different components, how they actually work for us. Right, so this week we're going to use the website manager. So if we go back, See, I'm on page number 5. So if we go back and take a look very briefly, right, at what we have here, right? So we have Route 53, which is going to handle our DNS, domain naming service, right? So what we're going to do today, we're going to create this little simple web server that our website manager on an EC2 instance that our website manager manages, right? So we have our S3 bucket that will contain our product photos. We have our Lambda, right, that will process the order, right? And then we have the SNS that will send our customers alerts, right, when their order is ready and things along that line. And then we'll take a look later on in this course at CloudWatch and GuardDuty that monitor and provide security. Okay, and then finally, we'll implement this relational database service, which is basically a database where you can store a very structured way of storing your data. All right, so the website manager here is who we're going to work with, right? Is the person that will manage the website. This person will upload the menu or upload any photos, right, that your website may have. So what does this website manager need? So remember, we created the website manager user, and we provided this website manager user with EC2 full access and S3 full access, right? And I actually had to add to that for this demonstration, and I'll add it here now. It's the EC2 Instance Connector, and you'll see why I added it shortly. Okay, so these are the 3 different policies that this website manager needs in order to manage the website, to create the EC2 instance and manage the website. All right. So that was our update on what we did a couple of weeks ago. All right, so let's see here. Let me move out. Let me take a look at this. So we're going to deploy a simple web welcome to SweetBitesBakery. Let me go down here. So what we're going to focus on today is the EC2 basics. We're going to create the security group and understand how Lambda, we'll look at Lambda and containers later on Thursday, but we're going to focus primarily today on this EC2 instance. So in the lab, what we're going to do, we're going to launch and then configure this virtual machine. All right, so this virtual machine here will, if you notice this little orange box here, that's going to be our EC2 instance, okay, where the web server will reside. It's inside of a VPC, one of our virtual private connections, all right? But if you notice here, Ms. Johnson, all of that is contained inside the availability zone or server, right? But the availability zone is inside of a region. Right, so we kind of talked about that in week 1, how this is actually structured. Okay, so when we choose to create this EC2 instance, there's a series, it's gonna take us to this wizard where we can go through and configure, right? And these are all of the different types of options that we're going to use as we configure our EC2 instance. All right, so instead of me actually just going through them here, what I will do is create the instance so it can be more real. And then I'll walk through them, what each individual one does for us, okay? But these, keep in mind, we're going to choose the actual image, the Amazon machine image, the instance type, right? How much memory we want, the processor power, how much disk space, the networking performance, the network settings, the role, who can manage it, the user data. So these are all of the different components that we're going to choose when we build out this instance. Okay. All right, but something that's really important here is the actual instance type as well. So when you look at this EC2 instance, if you notice here, we have different types like T3.nano, T3.micro, T3.small, T3.medium, T3.large, T3.x large, T3.2x large. So what this is, right, this is considered a T type, right? So the T is the family name, okay, which is then followed by a number, just as I mentioned, right? T is the family name, 3 is the generation number, right? So here, 3 again is that generation number. So an instance T3, the T3 instance is the 3rd generation of the T family. So in general, an instance types that are higher generations are more powerful, right? And they provide better value for the price. So the higher the generation number, the more powerful, right, that EC2 instance is. Okay, the next part of the name, right, is the actual size portion of the instance, right? So when we emphasize the size, right, it's important to take a look at the actual coefficient within itself, right? So we look at the size here, nano, micro, small, medium, large, XL, and 2XL, right? So this is a part of building your EC2. So for example, the T3.2X has twice as much central processing and memory than the 2.3x large. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's really important to understand when you're building out your EC2 instance. Okay, and then of course, each one is contingent upon the memory size. As you can see, the memory size gets larger, right, for each instance as that T3 dot, as the actual type gets larger within itself. All right, so here's just an example, right, a use cases of when you would use certain types. Okay, so we're also going to configure the network settings, all right? So the network settings, so after you've chosen the image, the T type or the instance type, we specify the network location, okay? The region, right, will be verified that you are in the correct region, which we will be. And then by default, it will by default launch in the region. And then it will also automatically by default add us to a VPC, all right? And it will assign an IP address, right? So an IP address allows devices to communicate, like you and I are speaking to one another with English language.
Yeah.
Computers are able to communicate over the network using these IP addresses. Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll take a look at, so just to highlight here, and I'll come back and take a look at containers. But what I want to, and I really, so let's do this. I don't want to delve off into containers today because I really want to focus on the EC2 instances, right? But just to give you an idea, right, of what a container looks like versus what a virtual EC2. So the differences are, if you notice here on the left-hand side, well, better yet, on the right-hand side, we have 3 EC2 instances, V1, VM1, VM2, and VM3. Each one has its own individual operating system, like Windows, right? So VM1 has its own Windows, VM2 has its own Windows operating system, and V3. It also has its own applications, and all of the stuff are the libraries that's required to run that virtual machine. If you notice to the left, a container, all 3 of these containers, container 1, 2, and 3, share the same operating system, right? And this one is running on a Docker engine, right? We'll talk about that a little bit more Thursday. But I want to show you the clear differences there, right? Virtual machines or EC2 virtual machines have their own they are self-contained. They have their own operating systems. They can do everything individually, right? Versus a container, they share, right, the operating system. So all three of these applications are sharing this OS here, if you will, and they're being managed by this Docker here, right? Kubernetes does the same thing. Okay, so let's delve into building out our EC2 instance. So the manager, the website manager, is responsible, right? So we're going to log in with the actual manager. Okay. So if you recall, the manager, let's go back up. I think I added it here. Oh, it's not there. Here we are. All right, so here we have the manager, the website manager, and its policies, including the EC2 Connect. All right, so this manager, this is their ID and their password. All right, so I'm going to log in as that manager. And what I'm going to use to make it really simple is a link that's provided when I created this manager. And I'll just show you here. All right. So if you notice here, this is the ID, right, that this is asking for, this login is asking for. All right. So in order for me to log in as that website manager, that ID must be there. Okay. So instead of doing that, the easiest way I can do this, right, is to use the link that was provided when I created the website manager. So when I do that, okay, if you notice now that ID, account ID, and this is for the business, you'll have the same thing when you created your users. Okay, so now I can log in with the website manager, and it remembered it. Okay, and there's our password, password, WM, the number 1, and the $sign. All right, so I sign in. So it's the website manager that will create this EC2 instance. Okay. And there are a couple of things I can change here. I'll modify that later on. Okay, so let's say that this EC2 instance component is not here, right? If I want to, before I do that, let's take a look at, you tell me, how do I get to the user? How can I see, I wonder if I could see his, just check just to make sure. He may not have access to see that. How do we share? So the website manager does not have access to see this. Only the root manager can see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out very quickly here. So and I'm logging in as the root manager. All right. The root manager is the individual, or the root user is the individual that manages all of the users. I can add a policy so that another manager can manage all of the users and the groups, right? College course projects. But I'm logging in as the root user. All right. So that we can see, I'll do that a little later on, to see exactly what policies the website manager has. So remember, IAM is the component that allows us to manage the groups and the users. So now that I'm logged in with the root user, I can see all of the users right? The website manager could not do that because the website manager did not have the correct permissions to do that, right? But let's go to, so if we click on website manager, okay. So these are the three policies that this website manager has. All right, and this website, the EC2 full access, S3 full access, and in order for the website manager to connect to an EC2 instance, which we'll do very shortly, I had to add the EC2 Instance Connect policy, right? So if you recall, I did not add these policies individually to this website manager, right? I added them to the group that the website manager is a part of, which is the website managers group. So if you notice these tabs here, right, permissions and then groups, if I click on groups, it shows us that this website manager is a part of the website managers group. And it is the group that has these policies. So if I click on that group name and click on the permissions tab, right, you'll see all the same permissions that the group has, right? So you create the group, you add the policies to the group, and then you add the members to the group. So therefore, those members will automatically inherit these policies or permissions that they're a member of, the group that they're a member of. Okay. If we click on the users, we can see that there's only one user, the website manager, inside of this website managers group. Okay. All right. All right, let's see if I have anything else to show there. Nope. All right, so I wanted to show you that. So I'm going to log out as the root user and log back in as my manager. All right, so if I type in website manager, there's our password. Okay. All right, so now that we know the website manager has all of the required policies to create an EC2 instance, let's do that. Let's say again that this EC2 instance is not inside of this recently visited pane here, right? I can either click on these little boxes here and choose EC2, but what if it's not here in my recently visited? I can easily type in my search, EC2, and it will display the EC2 option. So if I click there, so remember, we're building out this bakery web server on an EC2 instance. Okay. All right, so the very first thing so this is our Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, our EC2 instance page where we're going to build out our instance. So the first thing I want to do is to launch an instance. All right. All right, and if you notice here, right, it says name and tag. So I'm going to give this a name for my web server, and I'll call this the bakery web server. And I'm going to cancel that out. All right. All right, so next, if you notice, it's asking me, well, what type of applications or what type of operating system image, all right, which is the AMI is Amazon Machine Image. So all of these operating systems, we're just pulling from an image, right? Like you take a picture, right? But this is it has more detailed information on how the actual operating system is built, right? So if you notice here, there are multiple operating systems I can use: Amazon Linux, Mac, Ubuntu, there's our Windows, Red Hat is another Linux type, SUSE is a Linux type, and Debian. right? But we're going to choose Amazon Linux. Okay. So if you notice here, right, it gives us a little detail about our AMI or Amazon Machine Image, right? What's very important is that this is our free version. That's the version that we want. If I click on this down arrow, there's a plethora of different types of versions that I can get that are not free, right? But I'll choose the free version, right? So this is a Linux 2023 kernel, right? So we're going to choose the Linux Amazon version. Scroll down a little bit more here. So if you notice also, right, the architecture, right? This is a 64-bit, which is what we want, x86. All right, we could choose ARM, but we'll choose x86, right? It provides the boot mode, right? It also provides the ID and the date that we're actually going to publish it, right? It also provides it an EC2 username, right? And this is for the actual EC2 instance itself. Okay. You notice next, it's asking what type. Remember the types I talked about, right? So here we're going to choose type 3.macro, right? And we're choosing it because this, again, is the free version, right? However, if I click on this down arrow, there are multiple instance types that we can use. So remember I said earlier that there are different types, but if you notice, there's a 32x large, right? So it depends on the size, and companies will determine, you know, what type of size that they choose early on before they create the instance. All right, but we're going to choose T3.macro. Okay. All right, so our next option is a key pair, right? So, and this is kind of really important. This will allow you to determine, right, who can actually have access to your virtual machine. So Amazon uses what are known as these public keys, public key cryptography, all right? It's a way that we can encrypt our access, right? So that just anyone can't get in there, right? So we're going to scramble the connection link or the access to it, right? Basically, that's what encryption and decryption do for us. All right, so when we encrypt it, we're scrambling it, our access, and when we decrypt it, a person on the other end is able to gain access, right? So Amazon uses this public key to encrypt and decrypt login information, right? So the technology uses what is called a public key encryption, all right, to encrypt a piece of data, and then the recipient on the other end uses the private key to decrypt the data. All right, so what we're encrypting is our login information. We don't want to send my information. So if I'm logging in as LaTanya Lewis with the password 123, I don't want that to go across the network as LaTanya Lewis 123. So what this public key does, it will scramble it. It will encrypt it, right, to make it very difficult for someone to hack, right? So therefore, there's a public key that's located on your instance, right, that can only decrypt it. And then there's a private key that you keep, right, to gain access to it, okay? So that's essentially what this is doing here. Okay, so we're going to create our own public key, right? And we'll call our public key, create new key pair. Okay. So we're going to use the RSA, right? All right, RSA. So these are different ways that you can encrypt that login, right? And RSA is a very old legacy default type way of encrypting your login information, encrypting LaTanya Lewis 123, right? Or we can use a more advanced, a more modern way, that's faster and it has a stronger encryption, which means that it makes it difficult for hackers to hack your login credentials. All right, so we'll use that. And what it does, it will create this .pim file where we're going to store our private key. All right, and you'll see that very shortly. All right, so I had a lot of notes on this, but we'll move forward. Do you have any questions so far? I'm doing a lot of talking. Do you have any questions so far? Any
Nope.
questions? Any questions? Is it making sense, this information so far?
Yes.
Okay.
So the instance goes to the website manager and the instance allows them to like upload the data.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It allows us to upload data, allows us to build. So just think of an instance as your computer.
Mhm.
It's just a computer in a totally different location. But you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so we're going to give this a key pair name. So we'll call this the Sweetie or Sweet Bites, since this is the name of our bakery, Sweet Bites AWS key. All right. And I actually have it written here because it's really important to always to remember the name, right? That you're giving this key pair name value. So we're providing it with a name. So this is the name, SweetBites AWS key. If you notice, they're all lowercase, right? And separated by dashes. I know that may not make sense or be important now, but it's very critical, naming conventions. All right, okay, so let's move on. All right, so I'm gonna create this PEM file that allows me to open it. All right, so we'll create the pair. Okay, if you notice here, it's downloading. Can you see that? Where it's downloading something for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I click on that, so if you notice here, this is our private key, right? It looks really fancy, right? It's a certificate showing that this particular key will allow me to gain access to that EC2 instance. All right. All right, so let me go back real quickly. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it someplace. Let me open up another one. So I'm going to copy this someplace. I've already created one as a test, all right? But this is the one that we're going to use here. So whenever you get this file, you want to copy it in a location or a folder where you can gain access to it. So I'm going to paste the item in there. So now we have it here. It's not just in my downloads folder any longer, right? It's here inside of my SweetBitesBakery folder, all right? And that's where you would want to keep it, in a location where you can always gain access to it in case you need it. All right, so I'm just going to minimize that there. All right, so let's go back. All right, so we have our key pair login, all right, our public key. All right, so what's next? All right, so next, let's scroll down here. Yeah, I did this about a week ago. So by default, I'm just going to accept all of the defaults here. I'm not going to change out the network settings right yet because we do have a module where we'll cover this, right? But if you notice here, it automatically created for me VPC, right? I don't have any preference for the subnet. And a subnet is just basically, if you look at it like if you have a network, it's a big circle, right? And your IP addresses, all of your computers are attached on this circle, right? And let's say that we have an HR department, right? We can branch off, right, from that circle and create another network, right? Sub-network just for the HR department, right? Or in your case, let's say for the art auction department, right? So all of your users, all of the managers, all of their computers are attached to this IP address, right here in this circle. If I want to branch off to a sub-network, I can, for your art auction administrators, right? You can branch off from that IP address and create another circle and have those users log on just to those IP addresses, right? So what subnetting does, it takes one IP address and it branches off into different subnetworks so that you can, that's one way where you can use one IP address to create multiple sections for your business, right? And that's another way in which you can secure, but definitely the main key is to create different departments within your business. So that's what this sub network is doing here, right? Even though we just at this current time have one sub network, which is fine. So we're going to allow Amazon to automatically assign, right, that IP address for us. So we don't have any preference. Right, it will by default, the subnet is any availability zone, right? So it will do that for us, right? I can pick and choose the IP address that I want if I chose, but what it's going to do, it will have a, and I don't want to get too deep, you have a private IP address and a public IP address. Your private IP address is what your company, your art company sees only. Right? The public IP address is what allows customers to log onto your network to see your information, right? So the private IP addresses are hidden behind like a firewall, right? And the public's IP address allows the public to see your art that you expose so that the public can purchase. Okay, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to allow this default to work individually. All right, so we're also, the next section here is to create a security group. So what is a security group, right? This security group is a set of firewall rules, right? We need to set some rules. Remember I said that even with your public, right? We want your public IP address. We want to set some rules that allows certain types of traffic to come into our network, right? Or to access our business. We don't want any type of traffic coming in there, right? We want to set rules so that we can control what type of traffic. So for example, what do I mean? We can have hackers that come in on different lanes, if you will, to hack into our network. Well, a firewall will stop that. And this is what this security group does, right? It will prevent bad traffic from getting into our EC2 instance, right? So let's go out there and let's create a couple of rules. Okay? And we'll take a look at that. So we're going to create a security group. Let's scoop this over here. And there are some default options here. And believe this stuff is really so old school, Ms. Johnson. It's been around for a long, long time. None of this stuff is new. But at any rate, none of this stuff is new. I was going to say, like Solomon said, nothing is new underneath the sun, right? But at any rate. So here, with this security group, we want to allow a couple of ports, right? So we're going to allow this SSH traffic, right? And I'll explain that in just a moment. Let me pull this out. We're also going to allow HTTPS traffic. Mm-hmm. Then we'll allow HTTP traffic, right? And at this juncture, I'm just going to leave it from anywhere, right? So what that means, anywhere, anybody in the world can access your network. right? Only if they come through on these ports, right? And these are these each one of these. So for example, SSH has port 22, right? That's almost like if you're driving on an interstate, right? And you have your normal lanes, and then you have your HV lanes, right? Or then you have your bike lanes, right? There are three different types of lanes. And when I say HV, those are the ones, the traffic where they have more than one person in the car.
Yeah.
I can only travel in those lanes. Then you have the lanes where anybody can drive. And let's say you have another lane. Um, what did I say? Just for motorcycles. Let's just hypothetically say, even though I have never seen that. But hopefully, God knows. Well, it would be nice to have that because that's. But anyway, I digress. So you have these different lanes. That's what these ports are. You can envision them like that. SSH uses port number 22 on the network. So only port 22, you can have this SSH traffic that travels across it. And what that means is it's called SSH stands for secure shell, right? And it's a cryptographic, all of these are called protocols. It's a cryptographic protocol, right? And a protocol is just the language that they speak or that they recognize. Like you and I are speaking English, that's a protocol here in America, right? We speak English. Well, the only language that SSH understands that runs only on port 22. The language that HTTPS, which is secure web traffic, it understands is if it's on port 443, right? And then finally, we all know HTTP, that's on port number 80, right? So each one of these protocols has their own specific lane. So what does that mean to our EC2 instance? What that means is that only traffic coming from these three ports can gain access into our EC2 instance and into our web server. So the firewall, our security group, again, is just basically a set of firewall rules that only allow this type of traffic into our EC2 instance. And there are thousands of different types of protocols, right? That would be a great research, many different ones, right? That you can let access your instance. But these three are the three that we're going to allow access into our EC2 instance. Does that make sense, Miss Johnson?
Yes.
Hopefully I didn't give too much information there. I used to teach all of these courses, networking courses years ago. And I was a network engineer in my first life for many years. And it's interesting to see how none of this changes at all. We're just moving it into the cloud, which is nice. And then we're configuring it there in the cloud, just a different location. All right, so next, and I believe finally, we want to configure the storage, right? So the storage here, right, we're going to uses what is called the elastic block storage, right? And this is just a real tiny piece of storage that will hold like your operating system. We're going to load like an Apache server, right? An Apache server is a server that allows you to run your web page. Okay, have you heard of GoDaddy.com before?
No.
I'm trying to think what else is there that's out there, but it's just a business that allows you to create a website and put your website out there so that the world can see it, right? So an Apache server is very similar to that, much better, but they may even use Apache server, but it's similar to that. It allows us to create our website, our little HTML documents and CSS and all of that, and then move all of those files onto this server, right? And it will appear as a web page, right? For the entire world to see if it has a public IP address, right? So anyway, this EBC, right, this configuration here, we're simply going to, this root volume, we're simply going to install the operating system on it, and the Apache server, and any other types of files that it may need in order for this instance to run. Okay, so that's what this is doing. We can add new or different types of volumes to it. We can even add a different type of file system to it or modify it, which we're not. All right. Here we can actually add our S3 if we wanted to, right? We can modify or add an additional, again, file system if we chose to, right? But we're not, so we'll just leave this as is, right? So this is just simply saying, give me 8 gigs, right, of storage on my EC2 instance so that I can install these little tiny applications in order that I will need on my EC2 instance in order for it to run. Okay. All right. All right, so let's make sure that we have everything that we need. Let me just take a look here. This is the advanced. Yeah, we don't want to get into, and this here is just showing us different ways that we can manage the EC2 instance. We can connect it to a directory, add the profile, we can modify our DNS if we chose, terminate protection, stop protection, purchasing options. Yeah. Okay. Okay, but we're not going to modify that. We'll leave the advanced details as is. All right, so are there any questions before we launch our EC2 instance?
Nope.
Okay, so if you notice here to the right, our summary, all right, we have one instance. We're going to run a Amazon Linux operating system on it. We've selected the instance type as T3 micro. The firewall, we're creating this new security group that allows only certain traffic to come through. Okay, and then of course we have our 8 gig volume that will store this operating system and our Apache server momentarily. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead. Let me just double check. I always like to check just to make sure there's nothing that I'm missing here. All right, so let's launch. So it's going to take a second or two to launch it. So it's launching our instance. Okay, that was nice and quick. Yay. All right, so the way that we look at this instance is, all right, we can go back to our EC2 instance component. Okay, let me refresh it. Give it just a second there. So it's still loading. I have 2 instances that are running. Let me stop this instance here. I don't want this instance to run. Just like a computer, you can stop the instances or you can start the instances. Okay, and what I did, I just simply stopped that user one. This is one of the test instance that I actually used. All right, so let's go back to our EC2 instance dashboard. And still showing running. Scroll up, let me find my instance. Oh, there it is there. Okay, all right, good. So I uncheck it. All right, so here's our bakery web server EC2 instance. If you notice, there's the ID, it shows that it's running. There's our instance type. It's still initializing. All right, so it's not quite ready to configure, because if you know, the status check here is still initializing our EC2 instance, right? But if we select it, we get a plethora, a lot of information about this EC2 instance. If you notice all the different tabs here, the details, the status, monitoring, security, networking, storage, all of the items that we configured for this EC2 instance, right? So here, so if we take a look at the details, right, you notice we have pretty much the same thing, right? We have our instance, right? And it's still in the process. It's probably still initializing. Yeah, so we don't have an IP address as of yet, I don't believe. Yeah, I guess we do. There it is here. Okay. So here we have our IP address, 18.118.216.70, and that's our public IP address, right? That's going to allow you to gain access into the web server. All right, so we're looking at all of the details about it. All right, so there's our public IP address. It's showing that the instance state now is up and running. Okay, here's our private DNS information. DNS information simply says when a user types in bakerywebserver.com, then it will convert it to an IP address, communicate with the next device, and then pull the web page up on the user's end. Okay. There's our VPC ID. There's our subnetwork ID. Okay. Here's our instance detail, all right, that we have. Okay, the owner. And what else do we have here? Let's scroll down. Okay, and here's our private IP address. Remember I said that the private IP address belongs within the actual organization, right? The public IP address is what allows everyone else to gain access and to view your web page. Okay. All right, so then we have our platform as Linux, so it provides all of the details. All right, there's our key pair assigned that we assigned when we created and configured our EC2 instance. Okay, we can get the status. All right, so this manager has access to some, but this manager will probably need more policies added in order to see the status, and I'll do that later on. Or it's still initializing, let's see. Yeah, it's still initializing. Let me do a refresh on this real quick, just to make sure. Okay, good, great. So it passed all of the checks in order to initialize and configure. There we go. All righty. Okay. All right, so it shows that it passed all of the system status checks. The instance is up and running. So if we want to monitor the traffic that's coming in and out, right, or monitor the central processing unit, right, if we want to monitor the network, right, we can monitor, the manager can monitor the network itself, right, our security. Let's pull it up here. Okay, and let's see, it shows our different ports, right? So our inbound routes, that means what traffic is coming into your EC2 instance, what users are trying to gain access, right? They would have to go across these 3 ports that we configured, 22, 443, and 80, right? Our networking, right, is automatically configured. We have a public IP address, and we also have a private IP address. The public IP address, again, is for anyone that wants to look at your artwork. Private IP address is what's behind, which is an intranet, right, which is just the company only, if you will. All right, then we have our DNS as well. Let's see what else. What other information? There's a lot of information, as you can see, that we have here. That's very, very valuable. All right, and there's our storage. There's our 8 gig volume. All right, it's currently in use. That's us using it. All right, it's not encrypted. All right, and this is the location of where all of that information is stored. Meaning the directory structure, and it's in Linux form, so it's a Linux-based naming convention style. Okay, and the tag that we gave our server was Bakery Web Server. Okay, so now let's do some fun stuff, right? Let's create a simple web page real quickly here. All right, so the way that we do this is by, so if you notice here at the very top, all right, we have 3 different buttons, right? We have connect. So if I type in connect or click on connect, all right, if you notice, I have 3 different types of, not 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways, 4 different ways that I can connect to my EC2 instance. All right, so the screen that we're looking at now, all the screens that we're looking at now is how we put it together, how we configured our EC2 instance. So now we want to go out and look at it like we're looking at our computer, right? Like you're looking at your computer. We want to be able to see what it looks like. We want to see the operating system, right, in a Windows or Linux form. So this is what the connect allows us to do, to connect to it like we're simply logging onto a computer. All right, so, and let's see, how did I do this here? I chose the EC2 Instance Connect, right? Even though there are different ways in which we could do this, right? It's not going to allow me to connect using the session manager because I will need additional rights. All right, we can also connect using the SSH client. All right, this is another way in which we can connect to, and I believe your lab wants you to do that, all right, by using the SSH client. All right, you can also connect to your EC2 instance by using a serial console. That's where you connect a serial port, which we're not going to do. All right, so the easiest way to do this is to connect using the EC2 Instance Connect. All right. So we're going to connect to the new EC2 Linux instance that we just created. All right, and install. Let me make sure. Let me just double check something here. Policies already added. Just a moment. Okay. All right. Connect using the public IP. Okay, so I want to make sure. So I'm going to connect using the public IP. I want to make sure that that is correct. Seems like I'm missing something. I did this 2 weeks ago. So trying to make sure, there we go. All right, so this is what our EC2 instance looks like. It's like you sitting in front of your computer, right? And you're able to type. So this right here is just simply what we call a console log, right? And it's a Linux console log or Linux prompt. And we're able to do multiple types of configurations or setups here, right? But if you notice, we're logged on to our Amazon Linux 2023 computer, right? And this is our prompt. This is the EC2 user, right, that we saw when we created it. If you notice, the IP address that we're using is our private IP address, right? So what I am going to do, I am going to install that Apache web server, right? Install it and then start it. And the way I'm going to do that, I have a couple of some code here, and you don't have to know what any of this means, all right? But what this will do, I'm using Yum. Yum is just simply a command line application that allows you to install the Apache server, right? So what this is going to do is install it first, right? And then it will start it all at the same time and then enable it, right? So when I press enter, let's see, let's try to have this right. There we are. So what it starts to do is starts to install the Apache server. And it does it very quickly, right? That's why many people, there are different ways in which you can do this, but many developers use this command line here, what I'm using, right, to do really some installations can be complicated, but sometimes when you use this command line in just a few lines, it will automatically install it for you. So that's what it's done. It's installed our Apache server, all of the dependencies that are required, all right? And it's placed them, it's downloaded all the packages, right? And installed it and verified it, right? So now what I'm able to do, give me just a moment, is the following. And I'm doing this just to show you how you're able to work with your EC2 instance as the website manager, right? To create this very quick and simple web server, right? You would do this using more concrete files, but this is a way in which you could do this very quickly, just within a demo, the way that I'm doing it here. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is create this HTML document, and I'll show you. Very simple. Okay. But normally this HTML document here, right here, it's going to say SweetBites. All right, so you have HTML open tag and the HTML close tag. So this allows us to create a website, right? Our web page. All right, we have our header, which will appear as a tab, like all of our tabs in our browser. And then the body itself, that's what will appear on the page itself, right? Normally you would create an entire HTML document, right? And then point to that document, but just for demonstration purposes, I've simply added it here to this command line prompt. So when I press enter, right? So now we have this up and running for us. So if we go to, and I'll show you very quickly, if we go back to, all right, so I want to open up this page. So let's say that, give me just a moment. I'm going to open up this page using my public IP address. All right, so if I go back, since I'm currently logged on, let me get the DNS. Hold on. Did I pass it? Okay, so I'm gonna grab the public. I'm just gonna copy it. There we are. So my public IP address, right, which is 18 118.216.170, right, allows it to expose itself to the public. I'm gonna put this IP address in the chat. I want you to pull it up. And I want to get the full name, so let me get my chat here. Okay, so I put the IP address in the chat. But if you notice here, here's our header at the very top where it says Sweet Bites Bakery, right? As I defined right here in my head, right? Sweet Bites Bakery. And then in the body, welcome to Sweet Bites Bakery, right? Is right there. Welcome to Sweet Bites Bakery. Right? So I want to see, we can also use, so were you able to, you should have been able to pull it up. Were you able to pull it up?
Yeah, it took me to the same page.
If you do the same page. So that's your
Yep.
public IP address allowing you to gain access, or any of your customers to gain access to your EC2 instance. Okay. And I wanted to check something else here real quickly, because some of you wouldn't give the IP address. You really wouldn't give that either. And you can probably change. So I want you to test this. Normally you would give someone a web link, right? HTTP, here it's EC2 18.118, right? But you can probably rename this, right? Or there's another name, a shortened name that you would give your customers. Let me add this to the chat and tell me if you can open it up using that HTTP link. Right? And if you notice, that's HTTP, which is port 80, that allowed us access into our web server, our web page.
I can open up through that one too.
And you can open it up from that one as well. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. All right. So let me just test something real quickly here. I just want to see. I want to double check something. So if you notice, I'm using now, this is the private IP address, 172.31.28.192. That's the private IP address. All right. And the private IP address is not going to let me gain access into my web server. All right. Only this public IP address, all right, that is exposed to the public allows you to gain access into that web server. Okay. That's really important to understand. Okay. All right. So are there any questions? Ms. Johnson, that kind of concludes my demonstration for creating an EC2 instance, then launching it, and then adding, so here, and then connecting to it, which is what we have done here. We've connected to our EC2 instance, right? Using that EC2 connection, the very first tab there, EC2 Instance Connect, right? And I went ahead, once you're connected, I installed, right, the Apache server using the command line, which makes it a lot easier. All right. And then I also added a simple HTML page that we can view to see that's being hosted on our EC2 instance.
I did have a question. When you were on,
Sure.
it was like that black page with the bird. That stuff you copy and pasted, is that going to differ for like each website, or is it going to be like the same line of programming? I obviously not like the name and stuff.
You're saying this right here, let me go, hold on just for a moment.
It was
Just
like before
like
it
right
was,
here.
yeah.
Now, this right here will be the same, right?
Okay.
This will be the same because what I'm highlighting will be the same. Sudo just means just to log in and gives you admin permissions, right? And it's pointing to the directory location. It's in the on this EC2 instance, right? We have a directory structure var, the first folder, and then the next folder is www. The next folder under that subfolder is HTML. And then there's our index.html file. All right. So I haven't tried this, but this will be the same here.
Okay.
So if you want to create, my suggestion would be is to create this index in HTML file, right? And then add it to that HTML folder. So let me see, I haven't tried this. And these are just some Linux commands. Let's see if it will. It's not, I can type Linux commands. Why is it not? I wonder if he has access. LS would normally provide me a list. So end user, EC2 user 2, EC2 dash user. All right. So these are just Linux commands that get you that allow you to navigate through your folder. LS says list all of the content that's inside of your directory. This CD dot space dot or CD dot dot, it just takes me back one level under my folder. So if I'm at folder home and I want to go back to folder Lewis, I type in CD dot dot. All right, so here, there's our var folder right there. So if I type in, let's see, CD means to change directory, and then type in var since I'm here, all right? You notice now the command line shows var, VAR. So that means I'm inside of that folder. If I type in LS, show me everything that's in that folder. We should see our HTML, all right, our index HTML. Not unless it just created it on the fly. No, we need to dig deeper. It was var, what was the path again? Var www. Okay, so we need to dig deeper, right? So it's here, var www HTML. So that means I need to change directory. I need to go deeper. So I just do cd www. And now my prompt shows www. Let's list, and let's see what's inside of that folder. Well, there's our HTML folder. All right, we want to go deeper. I'm typing CD to change that directory. HTML. I can spell it right. So now the prompt shows HTML. All right, so I'm in that folder, and here is where my index HTML file is. All right, that's the path that we had to take. But what this command did here, it created this file on the fly, meaning it created it dynamically for us, right? Which is fine, which is great, right? So you can actually use this command to at least create the file. Now you can go in and modify this file here, this index.html. Let me see, what is the command to read it? Let me see, echo index. .html. I'm testing my my Linux. Just a moment. Testing my Linux command knowledge. So it's coming up here. It was echo. Let's see, it's either echo or, give me just a moment. If something ever, like I was explaining to Miss Carol, if something ever slips your mind or you forget, have chat GTP up, type the quick question, voila. Whenever it decides to provide, hopefully, a good result. So give me just a moment because I want you to be able to actually to see the content because it will have that information in there. So it's either echo, read. No, it's going to be something really simple whenever uh, cat, that's it. CAT. Told you it would be something really simple. HTML. There we go. So cat, CAT, allows you to see the content inside of that index.html file. All right. So you can create it anywhere you want, right? On any application. But this is the information that our content that we just added when we created this index.html file. Okay. All righty. Okay. Are there any questions concerning how to create an EC2 instance, how to configure it, how to launch it, create it, configure it, then launch it, all right? And then add a web server to it. So your lab, right, is not that detailed, but your lab here is a hands-on activity, right? And you're going to log into the console, search for EC2 instance, right? And select the Amazon Linux 2 AMI to free tier, right? And as you saw, the free tier now is 2T3 instead of T2, right? And T2 may have been the tier at that time, but it's still available, I'm sure. But I would use T3, right? And here it wants you to configure the security group to allow SSH, right? That's the different ports, right? That we saw, SSH being 22. Right, I will go ahead and select all three of those, 22, 443, and 80, HTTPS and HTTP. So the way that I went through, I used the EC2 Instance Connect. Your lab wants you to launch that instance and connect using either the console, which is what we used, or the SSH client, right? And using either one, right, will land you here. The screen, the Linux screen, all right, with the eagle on it, right, which is your EC2 instance. That's what your lab requires that you do. Okay. And when you finish doing that, make sure, right, you just take a quick picture of it or snapshot of it, and you want to post it here. So we're in week number 2. So your hands-on activity, you click on that. All right. And let me go under student mode. So I'll go under student view. No, it's not good. Okay, so I need to change something there. I definitely need to change that. Okay, and I think I know what I need to change, but I'll change it. Okay, but let me find, that's odd. I thought I had modified that so that it can. Okay, give me just a second. Oh, it's not published. Okay, so for week 2, hands-on activity, click there. Okay. Now go in student view. There we are. Okay, so the only thing you would need to do is once you have created your EC2 instance and you have authenticated and logged into your Linux EC2 machine, simply upload the image, right? A JPEG file or something like that. Okay, so we just click on upload. You just drag your image there and click submit assignment. Okay. All righty. Are there any questions, Ms. Johnson?
Nope.
Okay. All righty. Okay, well, you have a wonderful evening, and Thursday we will cover Lambda and containers, right? And then also, if you need assistance in building out your business and getting your EC2 instance, that will be a really good time also for us to kind of walk through that as well. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, all right. And think of a name for your business. I think it's a great business in reference to artwork and auctioning or selling art. I think that's awesome. That's an excellent idea.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Okay. All right. Well, you have a wonderful evening. Mr. Oliver, are you there? Is there anything that you want to say, Sarah?
No, we're fine. I think today was a great class. Miss Johnson, if you need assistance with setting up any of your stuff, you can always go back and look at the previous class recordings, and that could help you as well.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Everyone have a great evening. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.
Sounds good. Talk soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.